A group of sailors rescue a dog in the middle of an icy sea. Then a storm comes and the dog's actions save everyone. Welcome back to the next story of Animal Dream Story. Subscribe to the channel and start an interesting story right away. The Bering Sea was as calm as it ever could be, its vast, icy waters stretching endlessly beneath a sky tinged with the faint blush of dawn. Aboard the Northern Star, Captain Albert and his crew prepared for another day of fishing, their chatter mingling with the sound of waves lapping against the hull. The ship creaked gently as nets were prepared, and the salty breeze carried with it the promise of a bountiful catch. It was a morning like any other, until they saw it. A dark figure bobbed in the distance, breaking the monotony of the open water. "Debris, maybe?" murmured First Mate Sullivan, squinting against the light. The crew speculated. A wayward seal, driftwood, or even remnants of a shipwreck. Captain Albert adjusted his binoculars, his brows furrowing. "That's no debris," he said firmly. As they steered closer, the outline sharpened into the unmistakable form of a dog. It was struggling with steady, careful movements, its fur stuck to its body by the icy water. The sight was surreal. How could a dog be so far from shore? The dog's calmness was almost eerie, its eyes dark and intelligent, locked onto the approaching vessel, as though it understood help had arrived. "What's it doing out here?" muttered Deckhand Ruiz, leaning over the railing for a better look. It raised a paw from the water, almost as if signaling, and resumed its steady movements. The crew fell silent, struck by the peculiar behavior. As the ship drew nearer, the dog maintained its composure, its gaze never wavering. It began swimming toward the vessel, purposefully and without hesitation, its resolve defying the bitter cold and vast emptiness of the sea. Captain Albert gave the order to lower the lifeboat. Sullivan and Ruiz climbed in, their movements hurried but careful as they rowed toward the dog. When they reached it, the dog made no attempt to flee or resist. Instead, it allowed itself to be lifted, its body limp but its eyes watchful. As the lifeboat returned to the Northern Star, the crew gathered on deck, curiosity and concern mingling on their faces. The dog, dripping and shivering, stood on trembling legs, shaking off the freezing water. Then, to everyone's astonishment, it walked toward Captain Albert, sitting at his feet and placing a paw on his boot. It looked up at him with a quiet intensity, as if saying, "Thank you." "Get the blanket," Albert said, his voice calm despite the emotions welling up in his chest. Deckhand Ruiz returned moments later, draping a woolen blanket over the dog's soaked frame. The crew watched in stunned silence as the dog let out a deep sigh, its body relaxing as if finally safe. It was only then that they realized the extraordinary nature of what had just happened. This dog, stranded miles from shore in one of the most unforgiving seas on Earth. The crew exchanged glances, unspoken questions swirling between them. Where had it come from? How had it gotten here? And most pressing of all, what was it trying to tell them? The crew decided to keep the dog aboard until they could find its owner. Though they were still puzzling over how it had ended up in the middle of the Bering Sea. However, it quickly became clear that this was no ordinary animal. Over the next few days, the dog's behavior stunned them all. On the first evening, as the crew prepared for a storm, the dog seemed to sense the change in weather long before the winds picked up. It padded purposefully to the storage room, barking at the door until Ruiz followed. Inside, they found an unsecured hatch swinging dangerously. Ruiz secured it. The dog was looking at him, its tail wagging as if to say. The next morning, as the crew went about their usual tasks, Sullivan noticed the dog observing their habits. It began moving around the deck with a confidence that suggested it had memorized the layout of the ship. When a coil of rope snagged near a critical lever, the dog pawed at it, barking insistently until one of the crew fixed it. Then came the storm. The ship rocked violently as the waves lashed against it, and visibility dropped to near zero. Amid the chaos, a deckhand lost his footing and skidded dangerously close to the edge of the deck. The dog lunged forward, barking sharply and grabbing at the man's pant leg with its teeth to stop his slide. The commotion caught the attention of another crew member, who rushed over and helped the man to safety. The following day, Captain Albert watched as the dog stood near the ship's bow, ears pricked and body alert. It barked sharply and turned toward him, then trotted to the helm. Curious, Albert followed, and the dog pawed at a spot on the nautical map. Puzzled, the captain double-checked their course and realized they were veering slightly off track toward a known shallow reef. "Unbelievable," he muttered, correcting the course and glancing down at the dog. "It seems like it knows all these waters." By the third day, the crew had started to view the dog as one of their own. They named it Mariner, a nod to its excellent navigational instincts. Mariner continued to surprise them, showing up during critical moments as though it knew when it was needed most. During a routine equipment check, it unearthed a loose bolt in the crane mechanism by barking persistently until Sullivan investigated. Later that evening, it stood watch at the galley, nudging a sleeping cook awake just before a pot boiled over. Mariner's presence became an integral part of life aboard the Northern Star. The crew found themselves talking to the dog as if it were a trusted confidant. Even the stoic Captain Albert couldn't deny the growing bond. "Whatever this dog's story is," he mused aloud one evening, watching Mariner sit peacefully under the starlit sky, "it's far from ordinary." The dog's most remarkable ability revealed itself one misty morning as the ship neared a notoriously rocky coastline. The crew gathered around the navigation room, debating the safest route, when the dog, now affectionately nicknamed Mariner, pawed at the charts spread out on the table. It barked softly, as though trying to draw attention to a particular section. Skeptical but curious, Albert ordered the ship to slow down and stay alert. Moments later, as the fog began to lift, jagged rocks loomed just beneath the surface, hazards that could have easily torn through the hull. "Like he knows this place well," whispered a crewman. Mariner's uncanny sense didn't stop there. During a night shift, the dog began pacing back and forth across the deck, its ears flicking as if catching something the humans couldn't hear. It let out a low growl, then barked sharply, leading the crew to investigate. They discovered a small tear in one of the sails, unnoticed in the darkness. A swift repair prevented what could have been a disastrous rip in the strong winds that followed. One evening, while the crew was coiling ropes on deck, Mariner began nudging a fraying line toward Sullivan, one of the deckhands. To the crew's astonishment, the dog then used its teeth and paws to mimic the motion of tying a simple knot. Sullivan inspected the fraying line and muttered, "You did better than some of the rookies I've worked with." From that day forward, Mariner wasn't just a member of the crew, he was indispensable. When a strong gale threatened to push the ship off course, Mariner stood resolutely at the bow, barking in intervals that seemed to correspond with the swells. Albert ordered adjustments based on the dog's cues, and they avoided being swept dangerously close to a reef. Mariner's talents extended beyond practical skills. His presence was a morale booster. During long, grueling days, he would sit beside tired crew members, offering a paw or nuzzling their hands, as if reminding them to keep going. One stormy night, as the crew battled icy winds and stinging rain, Mariner stationed himself near the helm, a quiet but reassuring presence for Captain Albert. On calmer days, Mariner became a part of their routines. He would trot around the ship during morning checks, stopping at key points as if overseeing their work. When the crew gathered for meals, he sat patiently by the table, his head cocked as though listening to their conversations. His ability to anticipate needs and respond to emergencies earned him respect. One particularly striking incident occurred during a dense fog. The ship's radar began malfunctioning, leaving them virtually blind in the water. Mariner suddenly barked, his tone urgent, and ran to the starboard side where he began growling softly. Albert trusted the dog's instincts and ordered the ship to slow down and veer slightly to port. Minutes later, a massive iceberg emerged from the fog, gliding just past their previous course. The crew stared at Mariner in stunned silence. Their belief in his abilities solidified. When the Northern Star reached a small coastal village, the crew disembarked, set out to solve the mystery of their extraordinary new companion. They brought the dog ashore, recounting its miraculous rescue and remarkable abilities to anyone who would listen. Shopkeepers, fishermen, and dockhands gathered around, inspecting the dog and offering their thoughts. Despite their efforts, no one recognized the animal or had heard of a missing dog fitting its description. "It's almost as if the sea sent it to you," mused an elderly fisherman, stroking his beard. The notion sparked murmurs of agreement among the villagers, who began spinning tales of guardian spirits and legends of animals sent to protect sailors. Intrigued, Captain Albert and a few crew members retraced their journey, searching for any clues about where the dog might have come from. They revisited nearby islands, scanned isolated beaches, and even questioned passing vessels. But there were no reports of a missing dog or any evidence of how it could have ended up in the middle of the vast Bering Sea. One uncharted island showed faint paw prints leading toward the water, but the trail ended abruptly at the shore, adding to the mystery. When Captain Albert gathered the crew to discuss the dog's future, the vote was unanimous. They would keep it aboard as a permanent member of the Northern Star. Mariner, as the dog was now affectionately called, was no longer just a rescued stray. He had become their guardian, guide, and loyal friend. Before setting sail, the crew held a small ceremony on deck, presenting Mariner with a custom-made collar adorned with a compass charm, a symbol of his role in their lives. Word of Mariner's extraordinary abilities began to spread beyond the small coastal village. A journalist who happened to visit the village heard the story and published an article titled, "The Sea's Gift: The Legend of Mariner." The piece went viral, bringing unexpected attention to the Northern Star and its loyal companion. The dog's fame drew admirers and skeptics alike. Some believed Mariner had been trained in secret by a brilliant handler, while others insisted he was a supernatural being. Despite the attention, the crew treated Mariner as one of their own, continuing their work on the ship with their steadfast companion by their side. Over the next few years, Mariner's fame became legendary. Its uncanny abilities not only ensured the safety of its own crew, but also transformed it into a beacon of hope for countless others at sea. Stories began to circulate of Mariner appearing in moments of peril, seemingly knowing exactly when and where help was needed. One stormy night, a nearby fishing vessel lost power and was drifting dangerously close to a jagged reef. The crew of the Northern Star received their distress signal, but struggled to pinpoint their exact location due to the storm's interference. Mariner, however, seemed to sense the urgency. Barking insistently, it pawed at the ship's wheel and stood resolutely at the bow, its eyes fixed on a seemingly random direction. Trusting their canine companion, Captain Albert ordered the ship to follow Mariner's lead. Sure enough, they found the stranded vessel just in time, guiding it to safety through the treacherous waters. Beyond maritime rescues, Mariner also demonstrated an extraordinary affinity for marine conservation, while assisting a research team on whale migration routes. From then on, Mariner was invited on numerous expeditions. As Mariner's story spread, it became a global symbol of the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. Documentaries chronicled its adventures, featuring interviews with the crew, researchers, and those whose lives had been saved. To further its mission, the Northern Star crew has partnered with conservation organizations to launch a program focused on teaching maritime safety and environmental stewardship. The program funds the establishment of floating rescue stations equipped with tools to assist vessels in distress. Even with its growing fame, Mariner remained humble and loyal, continued to serve with unwavering dedication. It patrolled the deck during storms, barked warnings when equipment was improperly secured, and always stand by the team in stressful moments. Its presence became a source of comfort, reminding everyone that even in the vast and unpredictable expanse of the sea, extraordinary connections can bridge the gap between humans and animals. On the 5th anniversary of its rescue, the crew of the Northern Star decided to honor Mariner with a retirement ceremony befitting the dog's extraordinary contributions. The event was held aboard the ship. Scientists, conservationists, villagers, and even children who had been inspired by Mariner's story attended, eager to pay tribute to the legendary dog. As the ceremony began, each crew member shared a heartfelt memory of Mariner, the time it barked to save a deckhand during a storm, the discovery of a hidden marine colony, or the countless rescues it had guided. Children presented drawings and letters, while conservationists unveiled a new buoy station named after the dog, symbolizing its enduring legacy in marine safety. When the time came for Mariner to step forward, it seemed to sense the significance of the moment. Trotting to Captain Albert, it carried the small wooden carving of a ship that the crew had given it years earlier as a toy. The carving was now marked with notches, each one painstakingly added by the crew to commemorate the lives Mariner had saved or the missions it had led. The crowd fell silent as Albert bent down to receive the carving. As the ceremony drew to a close, Mariner took its place at the bow of the ship, staring out at the horizon as the setting sun bathed the sea in hues of gold and crimson. A hush fell over the crowd, and in that stillness, it felt as though Mariner was saying a silent goodbye, reflecting on years of loyalty and purpose. Later that night, back on the Northern Star, the crew shared stories of their time with Mariner, laughing and reminiscing over its quirks and uncanny intelligence. Captain Albert, gazing out at the sea, said quietly, "I think the ocean brought Mariner to us when we needed it most. Now it's time for us to carry forward its legacy." The Northern Star pressed on with its voyages, navigating the icy waters of the Bering Sea, yet the presence of Mariner lingered in every corner of the ship. Mariner's story spread far beyond their ship, inspiring generations of sailors, conservationists, and animal lovers alike. Children in coastal villages painted murals of the heroic dog, its silhouette framed against crashing waves and endless skies. Sailors in distant harbors shared the tale, embellishing it with each retelling, until Mariner became a near-mythical figure of the seas. On board, Captain Albert had a brass plaque installed at the helm, engraved with the words, "Mariner, a friend, a guardian, and a guide. May we always follow its example of courage." Crew members touched it for luck before setting sail, believing it to be a talisman of safety and wisdom. Beyond the ship, Mariner's influence rippled into unexpected places. Marine biologists began incorporating its story into educational programs, emphasizing the importance of observing and respecting nature's intelligence. Artifacts from the Northern Star, including Mariner's marked wooden carving, were displayed in maritime museums, attracting thousands of tourists eager to learn about the dog. Captain Albert often found himself staring at the sea during quiet nights, lost in thought. He remembered the first moment he had seen Mariner in the waves, the dog's steady gaze cutting through the chaos. "It's amazing," he would say to his first mate. "That one act, one moment of trust, brought more change than any storm or voyage ever could." How does this story make you feel? Share your thoughts in the comments and where you are listening to this story.